Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's my pleasure to support this third reading of the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Land Vesting Bill. As we've heard, the bill is to vest Parana Park in the Hamilton City Council as a recreational reserve. It is a wonderful piece of land. It's in the heart of Hamilton, and it's been enjoyed for decades by Hamiltonians. And I think it's appropriate that we do celebrate the goodness of George Parr, and we celebrate the philanthropy that he showed and the vision that he showed in providing this piece of land for the people of Hamilton. It was gifted to them by George Parr on his death in 1929. George Parr, we've heard a lot about him today. He was extremely well respected. He was a businessman, and he was the president of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce. He was a good, solid citizen. He was interested in politics, liberal politics, and very community-minded. He never married, but he was very fond of children. It's interesting that the debate about the name of Parana Park, and the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta talked about whether it was a Maori name or not. In actual fact, it is a combination name. It is a combination of George Parr's name, the Parr of Parana, and of Annie McPherson, who was a small child who died just a year before George died. Annie McPherson. Annie McPherson. So it was Parana, Parana as in Parana Park. So Parana and Annie and George Parr. So that's how the name was put together, and we've probably forgotten that because we say Parana and don't think of the Parr in the first place. We've heard also that it was originally a house with big surrounds, and he wanted for it to be used for a convalescent home for children that came out of the hospital. But the house itself was never particularly suitable, but the land has proved to be more than suitable. It's been used as a children's playground ever since it was donated, and it's been well used. Picnics, barbecues, community events and memorial services are held here regularly, and we've heard the fact that the dawn service and the citizen service this year on Anzac Day were particularly well attended. I think George Parr would be delighted to see the good use that's being made of his land and the good use that's being made of his gift to the people of Hamilton. But now it is time to update and modernise the legislation by which the Parana Park has been administered by the Hamilton City Council, and I think it's time to do that, and I support this bill to the House. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
David, cheer up.
Mr. Speaker, it's a real pleasure to speak on this bill, and we've had some very good moments in the House discussing this bill, and I think for people who might be watching the proceedings of Parliament might be thinking, why on earth are they spending so much time on speaking about a bill that's largely administrative? I mean, in a sense, vesting Parana Park to the people of the Waikato and the people of Hamilton. And the part of the explanation for that, of course, Mr. Speaker, was that while the committee stages were going on anyway, there was an attempt with other bills to push large SOPs through this House without them having without giving opposition members the ability to take a really good look at them and study them as is necessary to make an informed comment and informed decision about them. Pages and pages of SOPs by the government that's done that, and so as a result of that, this side of the House decided to spend more time on pieces of legislation that were perhaps less important in terms of being able to be debated, but nevertheless important to the people of Hamilton. And it's for that reason today, sir, that we are still looking at the third reading of the Parana Park bill and pushing it through its third reading today, and which it should pass today without any problems, because as we've made very, very clear in the debates that have gone on, the Labour Party definitely supports this piece of legislation. It is a piece of legislation which, has been said by many of the members, it's a good piece of legislation. gives the people of Hamilton more security about the parks and the land that they have available to them. It enables informal play, as we heard in the committee stages, not formalised play, not sort of football or soccer necessarily so much, as informal activities being taking place, flying kites, playing frisbee, etc., for the people of Hamilton. And so, from that point of view, it's extremely good. And no doubt, Mr. Bennett, who's just entering the House now, will be able to trumpet this piece of legislation as his major achievement to mankind when it comes to this year's election. It's also, I think, it's fair to point out, and as my colleague Chris Farfoy just pointed out, that looking at the land that is going to be taken in his patch of Mana, the electorate of Mana, and contrast the vesting of Parana Park in the Hamilton City Council with what's happening in my electorate in Mount Albert, where parks are actually being taken out and removed for the use and for the purposes of motorways. In the area of Waterview, in particular Owairaka, these are areas which are less well-off areas of my electorate, and yet they're having, as often happens, those who are less able perhaps to fight the fight and try and stop motorways and these sorts of public works going on are being pushed through, and they're going to remove a number of the parks in Mount Albert. And it's worth pointing out, as I did and many others did to the Board of Inquiry that met on this particular issue, that these areas, it's the people of Mount Albert who are going to be disadvantaged by the motorway. But not only that, you would expect that the New Zealand Transport Agency might in fact try and overcompensate these people for the loss of their parks and the loss of their sports grounds, etc. But they've been rather stingy, to be perfectly frank. They've been rather stingy in doing that. And so when we come to a piece of legislation like this, I reflect on the situation in my own electorate, and I contrast that with the visionary thinking of George Parr and his forethought, and looking forward and being able to put aside a piece of land in the centre of Hamilton, on the banks or near the banks of the Waikato River, that can be used for Wellingtonians into the future. And it's also worth noting, I think, that the people of the Waikato, the Maori people of the Waikato, the Tainui, the tribe of Tainui in this area, have supported this piece of legislation as well. And in many ways, they have a real point of perhaps pointing out that this was part of the Raupatu area, the area that was confiscated from Tainui after the New Zealand wars of the 19th century. Yet they see that the benefits of this park for all of New Zealanders living in that area, in both Tainui, both Maori and non-Maori, will be served by vesting this in the Hamilton City Council. There was one frightening moment as we talked about this bill going through the committee stages, where we thought we had lost 0.4 of a hectare or an acre of land, and I had to say that when I looked at David Bennett's face and he realised that he had lost 0.4 of a hectare, and that people may have been casting aspersions on that member for perhaps concealing 0.4 of a hectare of extremely valuable land, and he did, I have to say, rise to the challenge, went off, researched the various lots that were under consideration, and came back with an explanation of where that 1 acre went to. That was, I guess, the heart-thumping climax of this piece of legislation, where everybody was on the edge of their seats, wondering where 0.4 of a hectare had in fact disappeared to. It was true drama and tension in this House, Mr. Speaker. I want to reflect also in terms of this piece of legislation that this vesting of this piece of land is happening in an area which has the Puntly Power Station. And as we know from discussions in this House and from outside, this government is thinking of selling many of the assets right along that Waikato River that generate New Zealand's power. These are the assets that I have contributed to through my taxes, that my parents, my grandparents have all contributed to. They are our assets. And yet we hear from this government that they're about to sell those assets so that others can buy them. The mums and dads we keep on talking about that can buy them. The mums and dads who already own them but can now own them again. And we've looked at Contact Energy and what happened to them, to the assets under that organisation, that they in fact ended up in foreign hands, generating benefits and dividends for foreign interests, and particularly Australian interests. And this government wants to turn around and do exactly the same thing to the assets, our electricity assets, our energy assets that belong most rightfully to the people of New Zealand. We oppose that sale. We have a similar vision perhaps to George Parr, who looks to the future of New Zealand, to the future of Hamilton in the case of George Parr, to the future of New Zealand in reference to the Labour Party that is wanting to preserve those assets that belong to us for the benefit of all New Zealanders. It is absolute lunacy to sell those assets when they are generating returns of around 17%. It is economic lunacy to do that. And one only needs to read the column by Brian Gaynor of the disastrous economic history of what had happened to New Zealand assets when they were sold in last week's paper to get an indication of where we believe this government is going wrong. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to close on saying that this is a good bill, a good piece of legislation. It's something sensible that we can certainly support, that we have supported right throughout these debates. We've given it more attention perhaps than we would have other pieces of legislation of a similar nature. That was for a reason, but it's worth pointing out that we support this today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tim McIndoe.
Mr. Speaker, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Having had